today, let's talk about the blockchain as a service, or the blockchain as a technology, or blockchain as a service, as a business model.
By the way, Thomas, you set a really high bar for us because you said the last panel was the best panel you moderated in the last 5 years. You have to make this even
This one
richer.
should be the best of the best, right? Should be the best of the best. Okay.
Now we have the consensus. We have to make a really good one.
Oh, okay. That'll be great. Okay, sure. Just the first question will just raise my curiosity because it's too noisy about the buzzword blockchain. It's so noisy, and I read a bunch of the articles every day. Even in China now, there are at least over 100. This kind of the blockchain WeChat official accounts and self-media or individual media talking about blockchain every day. And I read almost like over 50 pieces of articles about blockchain every day. So, but what is blockchain technology? In my understanding, blockchain technology is sort of like the distributed and trustful computing things. But in your mindset, could you just give some kind of very concise description or identification on the blockchain buzzword itself? What is blockchain? Probably use 1 or 2 sentences to describe about that from Jeff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just like my presentation earlier, right? So in my opinion, blockchain has a lot to do with this distributed kind of ledger, which can guarantee the consistency of the data. And after that, of course, because of the smart contract, which you can really make the logic consistent. So eventually improve the efficiency of the operation.
Improve the efficiency of the operation. And Uma?
I would agree with that. I think the only thing I would add is it actually enables trust. It automates trust between parties, which right now is where we spend a lot of money and resources. Reconciliation, checking data back and forth. So it enables and automates that trust.
Okay.
I would characterize it more like Internet 2.0. If the conventional or existing Internet is 1.0, then Internet 2.0 really enables what the current Internet has been able to do, which is really the decentralization transaction without central party. And that ultimately enables is the Internet of Value, IOV, which is really a vision of Ripple. You probably have heard like IoT, Internet of Data, but what's really missing right now is the IOV, and that really removes the friction in the globalization.
Okay.
I think blockchain is Internet 3.0.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Blockchain is Internet 3.5.
Yeah, one thing that's very interesting is, like whenever we talk about Internet, like everyone knows what's Internet, or like some specific area, AI, VR. Nobody asks what's AI, what's VR, but everyone, like whenever we talk about blockchain, what is blockchain? Now, if you talk about Bodhi, what's Bodhi? And Ripple, what's Ripple, like specifically? It's very strange, like it's an industry, but not everyone knows what it is. And this is the question, like almost every panel or talk, people are gonna ask. But to answer the question in short, blockchain, it is a computer. It's a computer run by all nodes. It's not a metaphor. Blockchain is a computer. And what is smart contract? Smart contract is the source code running on the computer. Because it's running on blockchain, so people give this source code a different name called smart contract. I think this is something, but it's from technical aspect. Blockchain is a computer, which is a short answer. But I hope, like, after maybe 1 year, this question gonna be probably like understood by the whole industry. That's something I hope.
Okay, sure. I think if you say that blockchain is a computer, I think essentially blockchain is not the Internet 3.0, but it's more than like the computing 2.0 or the computer or the computing 2.0, right?
I said 3.0 just because it's
yeah, sure, I know that. Okay. You sure?
Yeah, can I add something? I feel like the definition of blockchain has really changed over the past several years. Initially, when Bitcoin was invented, people thought that was the only blockchain, right? And then people thought this kind of proof of work style blockchain is the only blockchain. So Ripple actually, on the other hand, use a different kind of confirmation method.
Yeah.
And those Bitcoiners say, oh, Ripple is not Bitcoin. No, not the
Not
blockchain.
blockchain.
And there was a kind of a lot of fighting around the
Yeah.
definition. But then, a few years ago, then people started to use the term like distributed ledger technology to kind of
Yeah.
make it a little bit more inclusive. But now, for the past year or so, people actually kind of settle and then started to use blockchain again to mean much broader things.
Yeah, much more.
Yeah.
Broaden the mind, or broaden that is the identification of blockchain itself. Okay.
And I think I would add, I mean, some of the confusion comes because people still are mixing the crypto piece, the cryptocurrencies,
Yes.
and blockchain.
Yeah.
And they can't get them apart, and so that causes a lot of confusion in the market.
Sure.
And I think what that does is, especially with the recent spikes we've seen in price and all that, not that I want to talk about price too much, but you know, it's increased the attention. I mean, there's a saying which at least some of the people in the corporate world use, you know, putting lipstick on a pig. So when you have something really bad and you're trying to make it look nice, and now it's like sprinkle blockchain on the pig, and you know, it just everything, you know, all business models that don't work, suddenly everyone goes, why don't we put them on a blockchain? So that's, you know, not the solution.
Okay, very good.
In my opinion, right, so see like, no, we see like a lot of discussion on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And obviously because of that, you see a lot of investment and also innovation. I tend to believe like probably going to define blockchain again and again in the next
Yeah.
couple of years. Right, because it's not like okay, all defined kind of technologies. So you'll find the scenarios and also the core piece or the idea behind the technology, and then try to find a way which you can really find the building or the value of such kind of source or ideas.
Okay, yeah, great. Because you know, just so far we see in different governments and the governments from different countries show their interest in blockchain technology from different perspectives. But when somebody talk about blockchain itself, and they will always link blockchain technology into another concept like decentralization. Will blockchain technology will ultimately lead to decentralization, or blockchain can still be used or be adopted into a centralized way? What's your opinion on that?
I think blockchain and decentralization are two totally different concepts. Blockchain can be centralized. That's why, like in, probably you have heard like there's a classification about like private chain, and there's like public chain, and what's the other one? Which in the middle, like member chain or union chain?
Consortium.
Yeah, something like that. Like it all depends on how, like the permission, like control. If you are controlled by one single entity, then it's private chain. If it's controlled by every entity who run the nodes, then probably it's a public chain. So they are totally different concepts. There's also like some other misunderstanding I want to point out is right now so many people are building application on top of blockchain, and they claim, oh, we are building this decentralized application which is called DApp. But that's not true. If you are building an application on blockchain, doesn't mean it's decentralized. Decentralized only when you have mechanism to make sure it's really like the control is like the permission are controlled by all the token holder, for example, not just by a single identity. So I think these two are totally like separate concepts. Yeah.
So I think so. Right now, whether the blockchain is public or permissioned or semi-public, or there are kind of different kinds of blockchain, and then it's really one property of a blockchain, and that really depends on the use case that you're looking at. At Ripple, we really focus on cross-border payments as a use case. And initially, when the company was created, we looked at many different kind of use cases. We looked at B2C applications, but then eventually we came down to the conclusion that in order to make a big impact, we should be really working with the existing financial institutions and also governments, regulators, so that we can provide technologies that enable them to be better and more efficient, rather than try to replace them. So in that sense, people might look at Ripple saying, oh, you guys are not decentralized, but then we are actually doing something that's really good for our application and use case. And there should be different types of blockchain to address different kind of use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with both of them. I mean, essentially, if you really think about it, it's a technology, it's a great technology. And you should try to use it in a manner that helps the use case gets to its conclusion or a customer journey you're trying to address, versus going the other way. I think a lot of people are making the mistake of like trying to jam blockchain down a problem and trying to reimagine it. But you know, for instance, if you think about it, there are many centralized players, especially in the business we are in, which is, you know, markets and trading and wholesale payments, etc. You could have one of those players adopt a blockchain technology. They could have blockchain technology which actually makes things much more efficient between market participants. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they've been decentralized fully and things of that nature. So I do think those two are slightly different terms. And while, you know, and that's why I think you're seeing increasing like some really major companies as well. I mean, if you really say, are you a blockchain company? They would say, I'm a blockchain inspired company. And which means they're picking and choosing what they use, essentially.
Yeah, so when you talk about the centralized or decentralized perspective, right? So there's really a couple of dimensions. The first thing is about the system implementation. I tend to believe a lot of blockchain kind of systems are distributed. Okay. The second one is really about the parties who are going to join such kind of consortium, right? Or join such kind of the system. In a lot of cases, you will see multiple parties, as Andy mentioned earlier, right? But that does not go against with another observation. There might be a leading, like of the influencer or the motivator, right, behind the scene, and to jump such kind of effort. You really even talk about the government, for example, right? So something we're working on, for example, about the medical records across hospitals. Yeah. Government can make some of these incentives or encourage the hospital to share the medical records with the user's authorization of cases, right? But a lot of time today, you see like when people go to the hospital, they have to examine everything, from X-ray and so on, which bring a lot of costs, right? At the same time, and they cannot see another doctors, maybe like the nose or anything like that. Now, you see more and more hospitals that want to build such kind of system anyway, and so they can have some level of sharing and with the user's authorization. So when the patient is there, I authorize that with a face or something like that. They can bring in the document from another hospital in real time and to check out what's inside, right? So I think that doesn't mean like, oh, you can have a decentralized system, a distributed system, but with some of the leading players who are kind of motivating the process.
Okay, and I think I would add one more thing. I think it comes in different flavors. So for instance, if you look at the banking industry, we are doing pretty much everything we do is based on private chains, which is, you know, let's say it's 50 or 100 or 20 or 2 players who at least fundamentally trust each other and they know that they play in the same space, etc. Which actually, in some ways, addresses. So, you know, I'm an MIT person as well, so I don't have to respect MIT people generally. But like, you know, when Professor Silvio was talking about it, I mean, what his sort of solution was trying to address was a public chain problem. But when you go to a controlled private chain, a lot of these issues automatically get resolved. And so I think that's why if you look at this technology, you can't have like one size fits all. You can have various flavors, 2, 3, or 10, and that's why, you know, it's you have to keep that in mind. So it's not as simple as one approach.
How Ripple can help, for example, help hospitals or the banks or the governments or the public organizations to do something in a different way as than before.
Okay. So today, Ripple, as I mentioned earlier, Ripple especially focus on cross-border payments because there are many different use cases, and actually, like projects like Hyperledger, they try to be kind of generic blockchain OS kind of the operating software, and they claim that they can address 140 use cases or something. Like on their Wikipedia, they say we have 140 use cases. But actually, Ripple is very different. We think there is no kind of a generalized blockchain. Each blockchain has to have a very specific capabilities to address certain use cases. So that's why we decide when we look at this.
It's very fragmented.
Yeah, fragmented. And then we thought payments really the core in the infrastructure. In order to, for example, address use case like lending or smart contract, they all tied to payments. So unless you really solve the problem for payments, none of these like use cases will be useful. So that's why we decided to focus on use case payments. And what we actually do is we develop an enterprise software and sell it to banks and payment providers. And basically, we help them serve their customers better. So I give you some examples. So last year, we announced this partnership between the largest payment provider in Japan called SBI Remit and Siam Commercial Bank in Thailand. That's one of the most innovative bank in Thailand. Basically, in Japan, there are a lot of immigrant workers coming from Southeast Asia, particularly from Thailand. And they work for like factories and they get paid on a daily basis, and they need to send money back to home. But if they use a traditional route, like using banks, they have to pay like $30 or $40 to just send money via transaction. And also, it takes like 3 to 4 days to get to the family. And also, the payload rate is really, really high. So sometimes, after you send money, you don't know where the money is stuck. Sometimes it fails, but you don't get notified. And it's really one-way communication. But using Ripple, they solved all of these problems. They were able, now that those Thai workers living in Japan can send money real time, just a matter of several seconds.
Yeah.
And also the cost is significantly reduced. And also now have a complete visibility into the payment process.
Yeah.
So they know exactly when the payments arrive. If it fails, they immediately get notified. So that kind of a real user benefits, now the bank can provide it to customers. So that's what we have.
So it's the bank managing the process of this kind of the currency transaction, but not the workers or
the. So Ripple only provides software to enable them. So using power of the blockchain.
Enable to the banks.
To the banks.
Okay, very. I think it's very interesting. Yeah. So probably some other this kind of the banking or the financial related cases from.
So I'll take a slightly different take. I mean, obviously, we clear somewhere around $5 trillion a night at JP Morgan. So that's a serious amount of money. And pretty much everything is STP, so it's straight through. So I mean, when we looked at it, I mean, we possibly have the most advanced like payment systems that we're developing, but they're not based on blockchain. They're just great payment systems. So when we looked at blockchain, we didn't see a lift in our network of putting in blockchain. I mean, we thought we could do it much better without blockchain. And I always challenge my team. And the final hurdle they have to cross on anything is why blockchain. And by the way, a lot of use cases fail on that point, generally speaking. So what we said was, what are the pain points? So one of the pain points is, for instance, payments get stuck for sanctions. And when they get stuck for sanctions, you really have to confirm someone's date of birth, or they have to, usually address, name, or date of birth to let the payment go. So we actually use blockchain just for that specific piece of the payment puzzle, because that gives us the ability to transfer encrypted messages back and forth in a manner that no one else knows what's going on, and actually preserves the data privacy laws and complies with them across the board. So I think that's one use case. The other places that we really, sort of have early sort of thought process going on is places where there's lots of capital markets activity. So you're raising money, you're offering debt, etc.
Yeah.
And increasingly, those are the markets that will get decentralized. So if you really think about it, I mean, if you're an Apple or an IBM or one of these very highly rated companies, you don't really need to go through a bank. So those are some of the other cases we are working on. But ultimately, we do think it's going to have a significant impact, both in terms of reducing expense for the bank, but more importantly, I think it'll give our customers choices that they never had.
Give customer more choices. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think blockchain is a $1 trillion business idea.
You see, everything's a $1 trillion business. Whatever you're doing, you say it's a $1 trillion business. Okay.
You remember, right?
Yeah, I still remember that. It just in 2013, and in one of my events, and one of the investors talked about his business model. Is that the billion business? Is that $1 billion business? He said it's a $1 trillion business. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, believe it or not, like back to 7 years ago, in 2011, when I first learned Bitcoin, and later on in 2014, I learned Ethereum. I truly believe this is going to be a big thing. But at that time, I was asking myself, like, what's the use case? And my answer is, I don't know, because given that early stage, nobody knows what's the use case of that. But I truly believe, like, as a platform, as a like protocol, or like in general as a computer, as long as it works, then so many genius people are going to build so many applications on top of that. So there's a lot of potential. So that's why I become an investor, right? But I'm not going to talk about that too much. But at this point, at this year, I think last year, it's kind of like this area gains so much attention from public. I think it's a good thing. Then people start to think, what's the real use case of that? Me too. I started to go full time to build Bodhi, and what Bodhi is, we are building this prediction market to enable people can basically trade the future event on top of blockchain. Remove the layer of the centralized governance, computer, server, etc., so that we, Bodhi, token holder, kind of act as one of the member of a on blockchain port, so that there's no centralized server, but people can join together to create and provide the answer for the future events. But I'm not going to talk about this too much as well, because
what you will talk about?
Yeah, what I'm going to talk is because is this. At this point, we are at so early stage. Even though today we brainstorm a lot of use case, or Repo is very successful, Bodhi is kind of one of the popular projects, but given the long term, nobody knows whether this is going to be a killer app or the most successful use case. I think there are more use cases that are waiting for people to find it and to discover. So I think this is a great time to learn and to participate.
At least participate, right? There's some kind of Jeff. There's some kind of the very different opinions, point of views on how we can adapt blockchains. And for Xiaohong's perspective, if you think we should use blockchain technology as a decentralized technology to escape from the sort of the currency governance or this sort of things, and to make our deal or to make our such a realistic deal or some kind of the other deal more flexible. But from the perspective of Umer and Amy, they think we could use the blockchain technology as some kind of decentralized way, just under the governance system, how we can use that to make things, to give more choices to the customers, and to the merchants, to the customers, to make the deal, or to make the transaction, or to make this kind of the deal more trackable, or the more flexible, or more diversified. But in your opinion, what's your understanding about these kind of things? Because I just listened to the first part of your presentation about Ant Financial's whole blockchain roadmap. But could blockchain service build a more trustful and more trackable and recordable and trustful ecosystem to people's credit history or credit scores or some kind of other things? Or what is the core value of the blockchain technology to Ant Financial's core business itself?
Okay, cool. I think that's a very good question, right? So I think in the long term, any kind of business, you have to really looking for the social value.
Social value, yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, right? So that's one point of this distributed ledger or the blockchain technology to improve the efficiency because of automation, right?
Yeah.
Of the operations, right? So from there, we see a lot of these values of itself. So during my as I presented earlier, some couple of scenarios, right? So you see even the charity itself has something to do with our core business because eventually it's about money. You're from one side to another side. It's about the payment, right? But now we put in the good social value, and so I think that's a good usage. And also from another example about the traceability of the food or the products itself, because we are an e-commerce company. So that's our social responsibility to make sure, right, the food is authentic and so on like that. So that also has a huge social value. And we talk about some financial applications, Uma also mentioned earlier, right? Eventually we want to some degree, even in a decentralized way, we really want to improve the efficiency because usually in that kind of scenario, you always have multiple parties of the clearance, right? Or about some of the cross-border payment. It's all about parties, right? So eventually, we want to have a good mechanism to help that, and improve that. So for us, eventually we come in back, and because we are kind of a big company now, and we have a lot of business, right? Yeah. It's interesting saying we are able to find all these interesting scenarios. We are able to make contribution to our business at the same time and find the core social values as well.
Social values as well, yeah. How to maximize the effort of the social value of the blockchain service to make, just like some kind of example just you raised, like the hospital can use that to make these kind of records more more transparency or this sort of things. Yeah. So, but some things still raises my curiosity about. Yeah, I just mentioned, and I read an article about, and maybe the government should be the very crucial part who are really interested in the blockchain technology. But we see the government, different government, I mean governments, the governments from all those kind of countries have very conflicted attitude on the blockchain itself. They may quite open or quite optimism on the technology itself, while quite casual to this kind of the users' behaviors part. Yeah, they don't like it, and really just make the blockchain like the token dealer things or the token trader things. But they are developing or they are exploring the possibilities of the technology itself. So just Amy, could you just give us some kind of examples or some kind of the brief descriptions about how, because you're looking for the Asian markets in different countries. So could you just give some kind of the good cases on how government can embrace the blockchain technology to do something right?
Yeah.
And what is the best gesture to those kind of the governments to do things with the blockchain technology? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So at Ripple, I manage business development for the Asia region. So I look at Japan, Korea, China, and also the other Asian countries. And it's interesting that different governments have very different kind of attitudes towards the blockchain. Particularly, I think one of the most kind of innovative and forward-looking governments is actually now Japan. Japan became the first country last year to recognize cryptocurrency as a legal form of payments, which is a really big deal.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why Japan took such a quick action, even though Japan has considered to be very slow, particularly for the past 20 years, there has been a lost decades and things like that. But one of the reasons why the government acted so quickly, there are a couple of reasons. One is that apparently the Japanese economy is declining, and government saw that we definitely had a really sense of urgency and crisis, and we have to really do something. And then fintech is really a kind of good way to bring more economy, grow the economy. And also in Japan, the ratio of cashless is meaning that the ratio of actual cash to digital cash is very actually high. So people actually prefer to use cash. So by making the business people adapt more kind of digital payments will bring more kind of business to Japan. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that, as you might remember, several years ago, the Mt. Gox crisis happened in Japan. It happened to be in Japan. So, but that was a kind of big trauma. So government had to do something about it. So anyway, so government laid out a very comprehensive guideline for how to work with cryptocurrency, virtual currencies, and also government provide a lot of support for blockchain. So I think Japan is really kind of laid out a really good environment for companies to innovate on blockchain. So that's about Japan. Now, Korea and China, there are a lot of things going on, so I wouldn't go into too detailed about that. But another country to mention that's really forward-looking, well, Singapore is of course, but also Thailand is really innovative as well. Yeah, they are really eager to invent and adapt to new technology.
Okay.
I mean, I think you're giving the governments less credit, at least the Federal Reserves and the central banks. They are actively engaged in discussing not only blockchain technology with all the major banks in the world. They are actively employing use cases. They have sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes with a variety of things. Several of them, Singapore being one of the prime examples I've used. They're really kind of thinking about the future. So I mean, they've been using our platform along with others. We developed Quorum for financial applications. Again, to Emmy's point, very focused on like financial markets, payments type use cases.
Well, that possible that we'll have some kind of the common sense or this kind of the regulation relating things come from the United Nations perspective or this kind of the global perspective to make this kind of the global blockchain use cases for this kind of adoptions to be more trackable or to be more easy to regulate?
I don't think so. I mean, you're
Yeah.
not going to have a United Federation of Planners or something.
Sure.
It's, I mean, the US is a big country.
Yeah.
China is a big country.
Yeah,
So
sure.
there'll be lots of use cases that'll be within that country.
Yeah.
And frankly, all these governments do coordinate very well. I mean, if you look at global sanctions laws,
Yeah.
if you look at global money movement laws, I mean, I would say all major economies in the world are quite cooperative. So, I mean, I think trying to do one thing top down is frankly the wrong answer, but letting everyone kind of evolve the solutions over time, and frankly most blockchain companies, I mean, like we are our platform, but we are doing work in Singapore and we're doing it in the UK and we're doing it here. I mean, so these things will evolve, and I think the governments will frankly try to regulate the financial players and, you know, the players who are involved in this. But I don't think you need like a global rules or global, it just has never worked for anything.
I want to
Okay, sure.
clarify, it is not like a blockchain technology which is regulated.
Uh-huh.
It is a business.
It's
on top of
yeah, sure. On top of the blockchain technology.
right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah.
So
just go
I
ahead.
want to add one more point. Like, you know, when I first learned Bitcoin, and I think, wow, it's an interesting idea. Like, if it's a payment protocol without a centralized server, so that the whole world can send money without any barrier freely. So that's why I started to trust and learn Bitcoin back to 7 years ago. Now what happens is this, as blockchain has become such a popular topic, now governments, companies try to control it, try to build some other barrier to block transaction, monitor transaction. I think it's kind of like a game, like, you know, like sometimes we want to push forward and sometimes someone drag it
It's
back.
not a technology game, it's a financial game.
Yeah, it's a financial game. How it goes, I don't know, but I think it's kind of like a battle, or some like arguments will last for a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But still, Jeff, I still have a question to you about, yeah, as you just mentioned, the social value of blockchain itself. But I still just want to just put it back to the business value into, and financial itself is like, will blockchain technology create a more trackable or more transparent ecosystem for example, and for this kind of the transaction credits and for the individual's credits or for this sort of things. So do you have the plan to,
Yes, I
to
think
do that? Yeah.
I think that well, and also positively we are already working on it, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, like just give one example, probably we can see some of the meaning of it. For example, let's say you have a house property rental kind of business like Airbnb.
Yeah.
They will care a lot about, okay, who is living in the comments over there?
Yeah.
If the comments are authentic or not.
Yeah.
Because that has something to do about that business, and also to verify who are renting the house out and who is renting it, right? Because which has a lot to do with the safety and other issues as well, right?
Yeah.
So naturally, like such kind of technology bring in certain kind of perspective, which can make a lot of operation better and in a verified way. I tend to believe it will bring up a lot of opportunities for a lot of business, right?
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, I think time's up. Just to draw a very concise conclusion, and from each of you, just what's your attitude or what's your expectation on the next step or the roadmap of the blockchain technology? What it will going on? Yeah.
Yeah. For me, like I feel right now this is just the beginning of the big wave of the blockchain revolution. And then,
Yeah, 3.0.
yes. And but something keep in mind, like when internet become an industry, a lot of companies try to turn themselves into an internet company. They fail. All right now, like those great internet company built from scratch when internet industry was becoming a new industry at that time. Blockchain industry is the same. Right now, it's a new industry. So I believe those.
Next year will be just burning thoroughly, and the next year, after next year, it will just be.
You will see, like in 5 years, all those great blockchain company will maybe build or start at this year or last year, and I hope Body will be one of them. Yes.
I think right now, when we kind of use analogy of internet, we are probably in early 90s phase. So that means like we are really building the infrastructure right now.
Yeah.
And probably there will be, as he mentioned earlier, there will be a lot of applications we probably don't even imagine right
Yeah.
now. And yeah, that's what I'm really excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know if it's early 90s, mid 90s, but somewhere in that range. I think what will happen is you will have a lot of people fall out of the blockchain game because a lot of the use cases are just being done because blockchain is a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I think people will focus on places where it can add real value. And so you will see it mature, both in terms of new use cases, but I think a lot of the current use cases will become less relevant.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, so I kind of believe like the blockchain technology is going to be developed, and with a lot of the fusion of a lot of other technology as well, right?
Yeah.
For example, with the Internet of the Things, you will see more and more this automatic execution of transactions across devices, right? Because it has the capability to do that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, because of the data, which can exchange across these different parties, right? Theoretically, you can also leverage the AI capability because you have more data to mine and
Yep.
you probably know more. So I can believe so blockchain technology offers a good infrastructure for us to share some of the data and
So share data for mining the data.
Yeah, so then you can do more things on top of that. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, just to draw a conclusion again, and just blockchain technology itself is a new type of computing, and it's more trustful and distributed computing, and just we can just set up more using scenarios and business cases on top of that, with a good morality and ethic. I think that'll be the good wish into the new technology and how it will just benefit most of the people in the world. Okay, thanks for everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.